Welcome to Crossroad Connection. We are speaking out for those left unheard. My name is David Schuringa. I'm the president of Crossroad Bible Institute and the host of your program. Have you ever thought about what difference it can make on a young person to go into another country and to have hands-on experience of helping people in need? Well, we have with us today the Dean of Students. What's the real...
Student Engagement.
Dean of Student Engagement. They have these non-memorable titles,
exactly.
but this is Chip Hubers. Huber.
Yep.
Huber from Cornerstone University, and we're just delighted to have you with us. You've been on the program before with our friend Martin, and we wanted to explore a bit deeper and more about what you're doing to help bring awareness of social justice issues to young people. And one of the things that you do is to take them on trips to Africa.
Right, yep.
But tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, David, for me, it started about 10 years ago. And, I think one of the things that I've loved doing is beginning with students to explore some of the larger, even global issues that people are concerned about all across the world. Things like HIV/AIDS, things like malaria, things like long-term food security, things like the lack of clean water, all those kinds of things. And so our trips, in many ways, I think, come out of getting involved and responding to those issues. So it's not just we're coming over just to kind of, help them out a little bit, but it's actually saying, what can we do that makes a long-term sustainable impact and that will resource this community so that it will flourish on its own?
Well, we want to talk about that the impact on the community, but let's just first talk about how in the world does a dean work with students in another country? Are you partnering with a particular course or class? Is it an interim class?
Sometimes it's come out of the classroom, but sometimes it comes out of sort of some different affinity groups on campus. At Cornerstone in particular, for instance, one of kind of the main group that's really been driving this global project that I've been involved with in responding to the issue of malaria has actually been the men's soccer team, of all things. Because sometimes you find, for instance, in a place like sub-Saharan Africa, soccer is everything. So for us, it was a great connection to bring our students who have that same passion and that same interest in something in that culture, and then to build a relationship out of that.
How many trips have you made, and how long do these trips last?
You know what, I have been in particular looking at going on my 8th trip specifically to the country of Zambia this May.
Oh, we have a campus there.
Oh, you do?
Yep, we sure do. Been there for quite a while.
Yeah. Unbelievable place. I love the country, love the people, but this will be my 8th trip in May, and they're usually about 2 weeks long, the trips that we take there. And in many ways, we probably call them really vision trips rather than maybe your typical mission trip, because really our passion is to take students there specifically for the purpose, not just to sort of be part of what is happening there, but to instill in them a vision for long-term investment and involvement in issues of justice, in responding to the needs of the poor, being concerned and becoming passionate about what's going on in our world.
Now, I can hear from your answers that you've wrestled with these questions I'm going to ask you, but I want to provide some pushback because I'm sure that someone watching has heard the pushback.
Yeah.
And you've probably read the book When Hurting Helps.
Yeah,
or When Helping Hurts.
Actually used it in the poverty and justice class that I teach at Cornerstone.
So you're very much aware of the issues, but just to put it in a simplistic way, we're providing these mission trips.
Yep.
Nice experience for these rich kids.
Yeah,
who can afford it from North America.
Definitely.
In fact, I've heard them called in a scornful way vacationaries.
Yep.
So and then they come back sometimes, very emotional, thinking they've done so much good in the world, when it had actually probably more effect on them.
Right.
And to push it even further, they say sometimes they can do more harm than good because it takes away jobs and initiative from the local people.
Definitely.
You create dependency, entitlement, and so these things are all bad. So why do you keep doing them?
That's a great question, and I think you're right. There's been, a lot of research even that's been done, and you look at even, I mean, the financial investment, some of the stereotypes.
All the money. If we would have sent that money, they say if you sent that money, they could feed that village for a year.
I'm working with a travel agent right now, booking our flights to sub-Saharan Africa, and you're thinking about this money could do a lot, obviously, in a community. But I think really what I've seen is that we keep doing them because it produces long-term fruit in the lives of our students. The students that I've taken, let's say, 10 years ago, I believe are much more passionate and much more engaged in living a life that really is not focused on themselves, but says they're much more likely to invest in, a community that's in need, to be in relationship with people in need than they were before they went to the trip. So
it's not like a trip to the Grand Canyon.
No, it's not like a trip to the Grand Canyon, but I think the trip has to be done in a way that they build relationships with local people. I think that's one of the dangers sometimes of trips is you just come in, you hang out with the same people that you already know. Like you said, you maybe paint a church, you do something like that, and then you leave and you talk about what a great time it is. But really, I want my students to walk away saying, boy, I'm so excited about what God's doing in Zambia, what their church is capable of doing, and how we get to partner with them in seeing God bring transformation to that community.
So you are following When Helping Hurts, where they say, oh, wait a minute, there is a way to do this right.
There is.
And that is not come in patronistically or like a colonialism.
Yep.
And we're helping you poor suckers out, but what can we learn from them?
Definitely.
What resources do they have that we can empower? Yep. How what can we learn? You mentioned drinking water. You mentioned malaria. What can we learn about from them?
Right.
So that you enter it more into as equal partners. Correct.
For sure.
Rather than us reaching down to help these poor people. They're in the image of God. They have contributions to make. We shouldn't belittle that.
Very much so. And I think in many ways, oftentimes students, I think that I've taken, walk away seeing things in the culture, seeing things in the church that they deeply appreciate and say, boy, they're teaching us some things. My life here, even in the West, even in the U.S., ought to look in some ways a little bit more like their life there because they have some things that are part of who they are, that's part of their culture that we frankly are missing here.
Let's get back to what you said about how it makes this permanent impact on them. You talk about hearing Bono in our last interview at Wheaton, and it has this profound effect that doesn't leave you.
Yeah.
These students go to these countries, they have that experience, and it changes them. The Christian Reformed Church, of which I'm an ordained minister, has now 2 prison churches, one in Newton, Iowa, and one in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Churches within the prison. Both of their pastors were Crossroad instructors.
That's great.
At one time.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep, definitely.
So it made this lasting impact on it. My first time in prison was when I was a professor at Westminster Seminary on the West Coast, and students took me in. That was like going into a prison is like a cross-cultural experience.
Right.
So you're not a sociologist or psychologist, but what do you observe happening? Is it connecting with something that God placed there? Is it inserting something they never heard of before? What's going on? Because it's like a conversion experience, isn't it?
In many ways, it is.
It's transformational.
I remember one of my students one time saying, this having an experience, one of the experiences she had, she said, that's going to be one of the days or one of the moments that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life.
Yeah,
like a wedding day, like a graduation day, those kind of things. And I think a big part of it, honestly, is that for many of them, it just opens their worldview up to things that they've never seen before. Obviously, not just levels of poverty or differences in culture, but even I think the understanding of the fact that in many ways, like we have this deep responsibility to think about what's going on in our world. How are we using the resources? I think that's one of the great challenges for them. They walk away with is what am I doing with what God has blessed me with?
So it becomes
in terms of
environmental issues.
Becomes very much in terms of environment.
Global issues, social justice issues, and we're hitting exactly on what this generation gets.
And oftentimes there's a great learning that goes on. I love the fact that most of my students, when they go to Africa, they've never even thought about or heard about malaria before. And then all of a sudden they meet a family that's lost a 15-month-old son to malaria, and they hear a mom's story, and all of a sudden they begin, okay, something that doesn't make sense to me. I can't understand that. Let me figure out more. Let me learn more about this, and then let me figure out a way to help respond so that becomes changed.
Do they come back with a profound gratefulness for their blessing,
yeah,
and maybe see it less as I earned this?
Right. No doubt about it. I think you walk away feeling, obviously, that, boy, God has done some pretty incredible things for me. But I think the challenge is, even for me, I get a little bit concerned sometimes. The typical youth group trip might be, I walked away and I'm so thankful for what we have in the U.S. and I'm just so grateful. Great, that's part of it, but I don't want that to be the end of it. I want them to also appreciate what's part of that culture, what God's doing in that place, and then that gratitude ought to translate to a response in terms of action, because if it doesn't, then in a lot of ways, like you talked about, why have we done it in the first place?
Well, let's talk about the students. And you said they realized, boy, this is kind of a revolutionary, transformational experience for them. And I come from a Reformed tradition. Yep. We have this guy by the name of Abraham Kuyper.
You bet.
And now he's being discovered by so many. So
exactly.
I had this in college and in high school a bit already. So it wasn't brand new to me, but I certainly deepened it.
Yeah.
Now, Cornerstone is more from the evangelical corner of the church. And is this something that we are seeing more in evangelicalism because of the work of Chuck Colson and so forth in his books? Or is Cornerstone University unique with this emphasis?
No, I think it's happening all across, in a lot of ways, the faces of evangelicalism. And I think it's something that, many of us, and I would count myself one of those people, is understanding, I remember writing one time about, it was almost like I had looked at the scriptures two-dimensionally in some ways and seen certain things, and then all of a sudden now, having gotten involved in issues of justice, getting in many ways building relationships with the poor that I'd never had before, all of a sudden I looked and I saw the scriptures three-dimensionally, and I saw this is the heart of God in here. And so I think that's happening all across the fabric in a lot of ways, of especially this younger generation of millennials in evangelical culture.
There would have been a time, perhaps, and I don't think this is being too simplistic, where you'd go on a trip there and have a crusade.
Yep.
And then you count how many people came forward.
I was part of those trips, even as a youth group leader.
You kind of leave and figuring, well, the rest will take care of itself.
Right.
But now you could still have that crusade. You can still share the gospel, but you also got to, help them grow some rabbits or dig some wells or give them some nets for the malaria.
Right. And I think, I think about, some of the trips that I led early on as a youth pastor, maybe 20 years ago.
Tell me about them.
We did that. We came in, and I honestly, I have some guilt over the fact that I don't even know what's happening in those communities now. Part of that is technology's changed, and obviously there's resources, but part of it is, I think we viewed ourselves as people that came in and then were going back, and we were offering them something that they didn't have. Whereas I feel like now, I think about the fact that my friend, who is the leader of our ministry that we partner with in Zambia, he actually came and spoke in chapel at Cornerstone last year because he has something to offer to our community.
Great.
That, frankly, we need his voice. We need his understanding of the scriptures. We need life experience, his life story. He was actually a prisoner in Zambia and telling his story about how he came out and how God led him out. We need that in our own lives as well.
Oh, that's great, because we have prisoners in Zambia too.
Yep.
But it's kind of interesting. There might be a parallel with prison ministry, because some prison ministry for a long time, a lot of prison ministries was merely evangelistic.
Yep.
And that's why Crossroad Bible Institute has become a partner to almost all of these evangelistic ministries. I mean, all of them.
Yep.
Because they realize that going in and having an altar call it's an important starting point.
Right.
But you can't just throw them back in their cell then and hope that all is well. See, it's the same principle.
It is.
So now what they're doing is they're providing them enrollment forms with us, because we can have a 10-year relationship with them.
Yep.
So we have that same thing, and also the students really like it because the prisoners, the people in prison, will frequently say that so many of the sermons they hear that just come in and out, they're the same sermon.
Right.
You know, they have heard,
Right.
and that's probably true for some of those villages
completely.
too. They've
Completely.
probably heard "Give your life to Jesus"
They have.
1,000
No doubt
times.
about it.
And they
No
politely
doubt
sit-
about
they
it.
They politely.
And then, you know, the reality is they're saying, hey, I want to send my child to school, but I don't have money to pay the school fees, or I want to, you know, I don't want to walk 2 miles to get water every morning. For sure.
What are, as we close here, tell us a little bit more about the response of the students, or a particular story of a student in Zambia. Something happened, and you saw it, or they related it, and it just kind of transformed them.
Yeah, one of my students that I took one time, he was a psychology major in college at the time, and so he began to see some of the counseling needs in that community, even from families that were affected by HIV/AIDS. You know, so many orphans, all those kinds of things. And so he actually then asked the partner organization that we were working with, World Vision, hey, could I spend my summer internship helping counsel and meet the needs of young people in this community? So he went back and lived in the village community for 10 weeks. One of the
These aren't 5-star hotels.
This is rural Africa, and you know, and just fully embedded himself in. And every night he tells the story of the fact that he spent every night basically hosting dinner for his sponsored child that he had in that little community, this little 8-year-old boy in that village, in that African village. And so he just built a relationship with him. He played cards with him. He spoke to him. He got to, you know, the 8-year-old taught him Bimba, the native kind of language, all those kinds of things. And I look at now, he's actually finishing his doctoral work, and his thesis was actually on, you know, sort of psychosocial development of students affected by the AIDS pandemic in sub-Saharan Africa. So you see, for him, it became not just kind of this one-off experience, but it became something that he said, that is worth investing deeply in for the rest of my life, because that's the heart of God, is to care for the orphan, to care for that child in need. And I love those stories over and over again of students who, it doesn't just affect them, like you said, for a couple weeks, but it shapes what they're going to do professionally, how they're going to live in the life of the church, all those things in the future.
This has been fantastic, Chip. I'm so glad you came. It reminds me of a song that Chris Christopherson wrote and sang, Let the Walls Come Down. And he has a line in there, I think you'll love it. He says, if you're looking for a miracle, buddy, you better be one.
That's a great line. Love that line.
And your kids are being a miracle.
Yep.
For those who are in need.
Yeah.
And if I just want to thank you for your good work with those students, and keep it up and keep spreading the news.
You bet, David. Thank you.
And thank you for being with us today. It's been a great program. If you want to change your life, get to know God's people in need. Become a Crossroad instructor. Get to know these friends at Cornerstone University. Send your kids over there, and they will grow. So thanks for being with us, and we hope that you will be here again next week.